The Summer Institute is sponsored by the NEH for college teachers. That includes college teachers at big research universities, community colleges, private colleges, and we also had a couple of graduate students. But the program is to really immerse college teachers in a given subject. We've always held ours over 2 weeks, residential in Concord. The theme of transcendentalism and social reform absolutely hooked the interest of applicants this year, and the participants who are here are from many disciplines.
Of course, history, we had religion, of course, some English, but such a wide variety. You wouldn't think these people could come together and have a discussion about a similar topic.
What drew me to the Institute this summer is that I'm always looking for ways to learn. I'm always thinking I don't know enough yet, and I'm always interested in learning more. It was so easy for me to really want to be involved in this opportunity. The idea to literally feel like a student again was so attractive. The list of the wonderful scholars that they were going to have presenting, and the activities as well. I also really did like the social reform aspect of it. This was a good opportunity for me to maybe get to know some things I didn't know yet and some things I really had to learn.
There's not a dull moment. There's not a seminar that can't help you somehow. I mean, we opened with Laura Walls. Oh my gosh, yesterday, Bob Gross, today, Jane Gordon and Sandy. And you just think, oh my gosh, there's so much information, there's so much intelligence to talk with other people who are trying to teach what I'm trying to teach. Finally, we can exchange ideas. So every day I wake up thinking, what are we going to do today? What are we going to learn?
I was really interested in coming to the Institute primarily because of the variety of speakers and the types of topics that we'd be talking about. So it's really great to be able to hear people like Sandy talk about her work in person. She's someone whose books I've read, whose articles I've read, whose work has been really central to a lot of the stuff that I do. Hearing how she does and did her research for that, I think is really great because you can see the way that she's drawing together these separate thinkers and trying to sort of paint the picture of what goes on behind the people that we're more familiar with within Transcendentalism and abolition, anti-slavery.
I'm showing how a small, untrained group of largely women were able to connect in to that great network in Boston just by letter writing and campaign, refusal to take no for an answer of a woman named Mary Merrick Brooks, who managed to bring in her neighbors, her friends, the important figures, and get them to take more active roles in the movement. So Concord shows us a little way in which, maybe a micro way, of how the bigger efforts take place. That's true today as much as it was true in 1837 or 1850. There are Mary Merrick Brookses all over the world doing very important work right now. We don't know their names because we hear about the guy who gave the speech or the woman who's leading the petition campaign. And they're important figures, but most of the time they've been motivated through the efforts of women and men and others that we've never heard of.
How did I become Henry? Well, there was nobody doing living history as Thoreau. We had lots of Minutemen and lots of Redcoats, and there was a Louisa May Alcott in town and a Ralph Waldo Emerson, but the one person that had been doing Henry had quit. So I thought, well, maybe it's time for a new Henry. I think regardless of what period you're reenacting or portraying, I think living history adds a really important level to educating the public or school kids or whomever. You read about these figures, you study them in school, and then to actually maybe come face to face with a Henry Thoreau or an Abraham Lincoln or a Revolutionary War soldier or somebody like that, I think it makes it more immediate and real for people. If I'm talking to somebody, a teacher, and she asks me about why I'm living at Walden Pond, and I say, well, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, they've read that in Walden. And so they understand, oh gosh, this came from a real guy who was writing these words. Now it's not, it's some 150-year-old phrase. But at one time, it was written by a 27-year-old guy living here. For Thoreau, environmentalism, political activism, they kind of go hand in hand. Spirituality and nature go hand in hand, but also civil disobedience is I believe it's a spiritual essay. It's about following your conscience and doing what God tells you to do, or what your conscience tells you to do.
Many years ago, when I first came to this institute, I was a participant. And for me, the most defining moment was Walden Pond. Because I'd read about Walden Pond, I'd read Thoreau's book, I was just like, I'm at Walden Pond. It was almost like this rock star moment, like I'm seeing, this great rock star for the first time. And it was just filled with nature. And we were walking through, Henry was walking us through the woods, and I could hear the sound of trees, and I thought, God, this is peace. I wanted to say this is God.
There's this thing we say about the fifth gospel, right? And the fifth gospel is like the gospel of the land. So actually coming here, I'm able to walk around and get a feel for, this place, right? And the people who were here, and the stories. It's an opportunity to kind of reimagine it and gain a better understanding from it.
The walking tour I did really was meant to complement the session that Sandy Petrolinas did on anti-slavery in Concord, and also to complement the tours that the participants will have at the Black Heritage Trail in Boston, and also at the Robbins House right here in Concord. And so the idea was not to make it, to impart information like a standing book on the sidewalk, but to really ground in physical place. By coming here physically and being immersed in the landscapes of Concord, the natural landscapes, the cultural landscapes, I think people come to understand things that they just wouldn't understand in any other way.
One of the greatest things about this experience was archival research. I have never done a lot of archival research in my history as a scholar. It was something that was completely new to me. The Concord Public Library here has amazing things that people can look at in the special collections. I looked at some of the Louisa May Alcott pieces, a copy of Flower Fables, which she had written for Ellen Emerson, to get to hold these materials that they held. To see some of the thinking that they had in their letters was a wonderful part of this experience.
One thing that I would like to bring back to the classroom is thinking of new ways to get students involved in archival work. This is what a lot of the best scholars in this field do really well. And I think it could be really good to have students emulate that in some way, to have some sort of experience of going into unpublished manuscripts and stuff like that, looking at them, seeing what it's like, finding things that no one else has talked about before.
I've also been inspired by this experience to try to weave more primary sources into my teaching as well and let students really grapple with those. I was looking at letters written by Elizabeth Palmer Peabody, and it was amazing. And just to see in her own words some of her educational ideas. I'm very interested in, and I work in what we call environmental or outdoor education. Those ideas come from her. I mean, they come from this time period and this place, and to see her writing about that, about how we can encourage the moral and intellectual development of children by getting them outside in nature, it just really gave me chills, to be able to see that actual document and the roots of that, which has so influenced me down the centuries.
I think the entire time I've been surprised. I expected to learn about Emerson and Thoreau and their contributions, but I've been introduced to a whole list of players in the anti-slavery movement. I've learned a lot about what was going on in Boston and what was going on here in Concord.
This walking tour of the Black history of Boston is just amazing. I mean, full of rich information, but delivered in, by a really expert storyteller. And to be there and see the buildings and see the sites, it just brings it home in a really visceral, embodied way that it's just a beautiful structure that they've created for us.
The law was set against enslaved people like William and Ellen Craft, but because there were people who defied the law, they were able not only to escape again from slave catchers in the North, but also to go on and lead very productive lives, first in England and then back in Georgia, where they returned. So they understood that community was necessary for protection as much as community was necessary in order to transform thought and reflection about the immorality of slavery and the humanity of enslaved into action. How is that similar to what we do at institutes and seminars like this one? How is that similar to what we do as teachers? We understand that knowledge is constructed, it comes out of community, and that creating knowledge is a social project.
The whole point is to bring 25 teachers, scholars, thinkers, poets, philosophers from all over the nation who've been doing teaching at lots of different levels, and create a circle of trust where they can listen to each other and talk to each other and share with each other each their own individual projects, and I've already heard them. They're already talking. We're already talking to each other about the headlines and how we feel about what's been happening, and what we think, and how would Emerson respond? How would Thoreau respond? What would Margaret Fuller say? What would Margaret Fuller do? Can we do what Margaret Fuller would do? And this kind of thing is already bubbling up in this circle of trust, and I think 2 weeks together, I think amazing things can come out of this. It's a very intense time right now, and this is a great moment to be bringing people together around this kind of constructive, deep, challenging, exciting conversation.
People might ask, what is the importance of transcendentalism in the 21st century, especially in 2022, post-pandemic, the middle of all the racial and other strife, immigrant strife and so forth that we're seeing in our country? I would say that's exactly why they're so relevant. They actually addressed the concerns of their time, some of which were quite similar, in ways that can still speak to us, giving us models that can still be helpful today. They are certainly a literary movement. We know that from their copious writings and their very inspiring writings, but they were a religious movement. They were a spiritual movement to many people, but they were also at the core, and this is what speaks to me most when I read them, an activist movement.
We're standing here a stone's throw from Lexington and Concord. We're literally standing in the cradle of the American Revolution. And we all understand the important issues that the revolution raised about justice, about liberty, about citizenship, about personhood, about humanity. Those are issues that were not resolved during the American Revolution. So it's not a surprise that the great social movements, from abolitionism to transcendentalism to the 20th century civil rights struggle, otherwise known as the African American freedom struggle, it's no surprise that down to the Black Lives Matter moment that we're having right now, down to the abortion issue that Americans are confronting right now, the larger issues at stake are the same issues that were at stake when this country was founded.
There's no better place to go, no better group of people in American history to go to than the Transcendentalists, not just to read high-flowing thoughts, but to watch them in action in the world, trying to solve major problems, some of the problems that are still with us, and doing so together, doing so on individual foundations of their own moral conscience, doing it in conversation and getting involved in the public too.
These questions that the Transcendentalists are asking are the questions we're asking today, right? The intersection between these philosophical questions about the self are deeply related to social justice issues, as we see with looking at the abolitionists and the way the Transcendentalists moved into and contributed in such a big way to the abolitionist movement. You know, here we are today facing enormous social justice challenges, and in the environmental field, you know, we look at the climate emergency as a climate justice issue. So they're all interwoven, and you know, this experience is going to deeply impact both my teaching and my writing.
So you might ask, what is the importance? What kind of change in the classroom, change in the social structure in our world result from 25 college teachers coming to an NEH seminar, whether in Concord or anywhere? And it's helpful to do the math, and I have several times. The teachers, the applicants, tell us how many students they teach on average every year. And it ranges from 300 down to maybe 50, 75. If you average that math out by the 25 teachers over the expected teaching life of most of them, from 25 to 30 years probably, they are going to teach and impact over 75 to 90,000 students. And I will put that in front of you as a very important number for the kinds of people who can be influenced by what they learn here.
Every time I come to this institute, I learn something new. Every single time, and it's from participants and it's from lecturers. So I never get tired of coming here. I love Concord. I love the whole environment of Concord and all the literary people that we associate, with it.